The BBC presents My Word. And here to introduce the program and the panel is Jack Longland.
My Word is a word game played by people whose business is words, and those taking part are Anne Scott James, Denis Norden, Dilys Powell, and Frank Muir. Round one tests their respective vocabularies, and 2 marks if they get the meaning of these words approximately right. We begin with Dilys Powell. Dilys, what is a clone? C-L-O-N-E.
Clone. It's a plant.
But what kind of plant?
It's a parasitic plant.
A clone is a group of plants which are produced vegetatively from one original seedling or stock. So they're all horribly identical. There's no difference between them at all. And it's from a Greek word meaning twig or slip. Denis Norden, what is or are Infusoria? I-N-F-U-S-O-R-I-A, Infusoria.
Well, I always associate the word anything to do with infuse with tea. So infusoria would be very, very posh teapots that would reject tea bags.
It doesn't look awfully like that when I sort of think of what they do look like.
Well, it's something to do with infusion, with the process of infusion.
Yes, it is.
Whatever that is.
Yeah.
Which is, I don't know, putting in one for the pot and...
Think of very, very, very tiny things.
Dolls' teapots.
I can't mark you on this one. This is a class of very primitive animal matter, protozoa, and they're found in infusions, and Denis was right there, of decaying animal or vegetable matter. If you turn over a stone, you might find a few of these. Perhaps half a mark for the infusions. Anne Scott James, what's the meaning of voodoo? V-O-O-D-O-O.
It's a kind of magic, black magic cult or rite, in which a good deal of killing of animals goes on.
Yes, that's absolutely right. It's the use of or belief in witchcraft and black magic in various parts of the West Indies and in parts of the southern United States, I'm told, and it comes from an African word about magic. Frank Muir, what does Humdinger mean? H-U-M-D-I-N-G-E-R.
It means a sort of whiz kid. Real Humdinger. It's complimentary. It means a chap with energy and go and...
Jolly good.
Humdinger is American for an exceptionally good person or exceptionally good thing, roughly. Before we begin round 2, I give each team a quotation for them to write down. And I hope that the 2 women members of the team will have time to study those quotations, because at the end of the program, I shall ask them where they come from. Dilys Powell and Frank Muir, your quotation is, Toot Toot Tootsie, goodbye. And Anne Scott James and Denis, yours is, even the weariest river winds somewhere safe to sea. And at the end of the program, I shall ask Frank and Denis to give me their ideas of how these came to be said or written. Round 2 is about the author of the week. And what I want members of the teams to do is to identify the author and to answer a few further questions about the author and the books, and 2 marks each time. And here's a quotation to help you. I am not in the least provoked at the sight of a lawyer, a pickpocket, a colonel, a fool, a lord, a gamester, a politician, a whoremonger, a physician, an evidence, a suborner, an attorney, a traitor, or the like. Now, Dilys Powell, who is the writer, and in which book will you find the quotation?
Swift.
Yes, well done. Try the book.
Gulliver's
Yes.
Travels.
Well done, Dilys. 2 marks it is. Denis Norden, What were the other 3 voyages that Lemuel Gulliver carried out?
To the Lilliputians.
Yes.
The one I can never pronounce, Brobdingnagians.
Yes, yeah. You remember the 3rd?
Voyage to Laputa.
Well done. Well done, Dennis. 2 marks it is. Now, Anne Scott James, of the people that he met, which were the silly ones, which were the big ones, and which were the little ones?
Well, the little ones were the Lilliputians.
And?
The Brobdingnagians were the large ones.
Yes.
And the Lilliputans were the stupid ones, silly ones.
Yes, 2 marks it is. Yes, the Lilliputians were about 6 inches high. The Brobdingnagians were pretty frightening because they were 60 feet high, and most of those who lived in and around Laputa were pretty odd. Now, Frank Muir, what was the name of the girl to whom Swift wrote a journal?
Well, he had 2 birds, didn't he?
Yes.
There was one, and they're both called Esther, oddly enough. One was Esther Johnson, and the other was Esther Van Rummer.
Yes.
He wrote to Esther Van Rummer. He wrote a poem about them, didn't he?
Yes, he wrote poems, both.
Cellulus and Vanessa. So Esther Van Rummer was Vanessa.
Yes.
And Esther Johnson, who was the daughter of a serving woman at the house that Swift started his career at, and was believed to have been the daughter of Sir William Temple. Swift may later have married, and he wrote to her a journal full of baby talk. It was called A Journal to Stella.
Brilliant, thank you, well done.
She died in 1728.
Quite definitely an extra bonus mark for erudition, 3 marks, and Stella was indeed Esther Johnson, and it's doubtful, as Frank says, whether he did in fact marry her, but he was buried beside her in the graveyard at St. Patrick's Cathedral in Dublin. Now we come to round 3. Well, there are social clubs and political clubs, and clubs for people with specialist professions or hobbies, and I've invented a few imaginary ones. What special group do you think each would be likely to attract, if not in all cases actually to welcome? And 2 marks for any reasonably ingenious answer. We begin with Dilys Powell. Dilys, whom would you find in the Pikestaff Club?
Not very plain people.
Yes, plain in what sort of way?
Not plain. Like pikes, not good looking.
Okay, that's 2 marks. Plain as a pikestaff, which was originally a packstaff, which was the thing that a peddler carried his pack on his back with, and that got worn very, very plain indeed. So you would expect to find ugly people in a Pikestaff Club. Now, Denis Norden, who would and who almost certainly wouldn't be members of the Wild Horses Club?
Horses wouldn't.
I guess fair.
Wild Horses Club, I should say the members would be people whose chief characteristic is reluctance, such as debutantes or Frank on the subject of Jonathan Swift.
I think it's just a sort of jokey name for the jockey club. How about that?
I think Dennis is near enough right for the 2 marks. I was hoping you might also add, Dennis, that thinking, as you weren't doing of yourself, that these are the people you didn't want to meet. These were your enemies, the people you couldn't stand, so that wild horses wouldn't drag you into the club. Anyway, 2 marks, I think it was a very good answer. Anne Scott James, what sort of people would join the Hind Leg Club?
I should think people are always going to the lavatory, wouldn't you?
You mean peers of the realm?
I must admit, I was thinking about those with 2 rather than 4 legs. I think 2 marks for jolly good ingenuity. I was thinking of the phrase, he could talk the hind leg off a donkey, so that probably the people who would join the Hind Leg Club would be actors and politicians and a few writers. Anyway, people who talked a lot and most of the time. Now, Frank Muir, who would make appropriate members of the Smilers Clubs?
The Conservative Party.
I was hoping you would say murderers and spies and traitors, because they're very different indeed from any Prime Minister.
Smiler with the knife.
Smiler with the knife
under his
cloak.
cloaky.
Yeah.
Which is a Chaucer phrase, and in this club the membership would tend to be a bit temporary, I think. Anyway, 2 marks, because that was just as ingenious. Well, now for a round of differences. For 2 marks, can you define the differences in meaning between these pairs of fairly similar-sounding words? Dilys Powell, Ossuary and Ossuary. O-S-I-E-R-Y and O-S-S-U-A-R-Y. Ossuary, Ossuary.
Ossuary must mean a place you keep bones, I should have thought, doesn't it?
Yes, what sort of thing do you keep bones in?
Coffin.
A reliquary.
Yes, fair enough. Yes, that's all right. And ossuary?
I think something to do with osier, sort of willow twigs.
Yes, and what would the noun mean, probably?
A place where you grew them or plaited them or used them.
Yes, that's fine. Jolly good. 2 marks.
The ancient Britons wore wickerwork socks. It's called Osiery.
Now, Denis Norden. Paladin and Palanquin. P-A-L-A-D-I-N and P-A-L-A-N-Q-U-I-N. Paladin, Palanquin.
Paladin is some kind of Eastern potentate, also the name of a short-lived television western series. Palanquin, it's what, in Aladdin, the princess enters in.
Yes.
It's a kind of a telephone box with curtains drawn, carried by 4 chaps who, in Act 2, play the sailors in the shipwreck scene. And they all come down at the end in the chorus.
That's splendid, that one. But have another think about Paladin and keep it away from the East and bring it back into Europe. See if that helps.
Paladin is actually a friend of Aladdin.
Something to do with those tournament days.
Yes, it's getting nearer.
Is it? Yeah.
Sort of romance.
Yes, that's more like it. Right. 1.5. Let's take it in reverse order, as Denis did. Palanquin is a covered litter for 1 in India and places east, carried, as he says, either by 4 or 6 chaps.
I'm sure Ivanhoe had paladins.
No, it's a bit earlier than that, Anne. He was any one of the 12 peers of Charlemagne's court, and the chief of them was the Count Palatine, or he could, in general sense, be a knight-errant. And Scott James, Polypetalus and Polysepalus, P-E-T-A-L-O-U-S and S-E-P-A-L-O-U-S, Polypetalus, Polysepalus.
On your own, kid.
I think one means it's got a lot of petals, and the other means it's got a lot of sepals.
And it's absolutely right. You've got 2 marks at once.
Botanical.
Frank Muir, Lithotomy and Lithotrity. L-I-T-H-O-T-O-M-Y, Lithotomy, and L-I-T-H-O-T-R-I-T-Y, Lithotrity.
Otomy is having it off in a hospital.
Yes.
In a sense. Clipped off in a hospital. And litho is a stone, as in lithography. Having a stone removed from the kidney.
That's not at all.
Surgically, presumably.
That's lithotomy.
Isn't.
Lithotrity is not all that different.
Dispersing the stone within the patient.
2
that
marks.
means other than surgery.
2 marks, well done.
The hammer.
These are 2 not very nice surgical operations. Lithotomy is the operation of cutting for the removal of stone in the bladder, and poor old Samuel Pepys had it without an anaesthetic at all. And it means stone cutting. But lithotrity is crushing the stone in the bladder into such small particles that it can be passed out without all that trouble. Also from the Greek. 2 rather odd operations. Well, now we come to the last round and go back to those quotations I gave the teams earlier in the programme. For 2 marks, Dilys Powell, can you give me the origin of your quotation? Toot Toot Tootsie, goodbye.
It's a popular song.
But how popular and when?
From a film, I think.
Yes, it did come in a film.
Al Jolson.
Well done. Yeah. 2 marks it is. It came, I think, first in a stage show, which was called Bombo, which starred Al Jolson. But then in a film, Jolson sings again, and I think the lyrics and the music were written by Gilbert Keys, Ernie Erdman, and Dan Russo, and good luck to them. 2 marks. And Scott James, now the origin of your quotation. Even the weariest river winds somewhere safe to sea.
Oh, Swinburne.
Absolutely right, 2 marks. It's A.C. Swinburne, The Garden of Proserpine, or Proserpine, whichever you prefer to use. Well, now I'm going to ask Frank and Denis to give me their explanations of how these quotations came into being, and for this round only, the marks will go to whichever improbable story receives the longer applause from the audience here in the theatre. So back to Frank Muir and to his quotation, Toot Toot Tootsie, goodbye.
It is absolutely extraordinary, isn't it? You know, life is such a mass of coincidences. I sent a telegram off this afternoon to a friend of mine called Warren Toot. You think I'm making that name up, but it does exist. He's a novelist. I sent him that telegram just this afternoon. Toot Toot Tootsie, goodbye. It was actually in connection with a work of art which he found at an auction sale, and sent me the catalogue and said, did I want it or not? And so I sent him the telegram. I'll tell you how all this came about. I have an original watercolour by James I. I have an armchair, Louis Sayres. I have a very rare Constable, nude. I have a Swift poem in manuscript. I have a very old miniature of Queen Victoria. And I'm just going to buy an unusual Sickert portrait. Now, that is what I wanted to tell you. These things don't happen overnight to amass a collection like that. I've been at it since last Thursday. And I would have had more, but the outlay, I should think I must have spent upwards of £4 on that lot. But it is absolutely genuine. I mean, the original watercolour by James I, you see, I have these 2 children. The drawings that Sally does are quite good, but she's the younger child. My elder son, James, draws quite well, and this watercolour I've got by James, he's the first, is really, you know, a nice thing to have. My armchair, Louis Sayres, well, I bought this from Louis Margolis, and I said, I keep saying, you know, what age is it? And Louis says, you know. Louis says it's 1969, but the very rare Constable nude, it didn't cost me anything. It was in the local paper because this police constable, Arbuthnot, had stripped off and dived into the Thames at Staines to rescue what he thought was a body, and it was actually a discarded sack of potatoes. But it's a very rare picture of a constable nude. A Swift poem in manuscript, well, I wrote it in about 20 seconds. Don't get them swifter than that, do you? The very old miniature of Queen Elizabeth is very, very charming. It's got a fine lace edge. It's a 3/8 stamp, actually. But my friend Toot did send me a catalogue, and he of this very unusual Sickert portrait. It's not actually Walter Sickert, the R.A. artist. It's Mrs. Edith Sickert, and the picture is worked in Berlin wools, and it's a portrait of the harbour master at Broadstairs showing the groin. And they want 1 and 9 for it, and it's in this sale, and it's item lot 222, and he said, did I want to buy it? So that's why I say I sent off this telegram this afternoon, and the telegram just said simply the lot number, and I just said 222 Sickert buy.
And now we go on to Denis Norden, and if you remember, his quotation was, even the weariest river winds somewhere safe to sea.
I'm addressing my message today to newlyweds. You see, amid all the economic problems which bedevil our country today, the one question that nobody has yet faced up to is, what are we going to do about the concentration of wealth in the hands of TV repairmen and plumbers and chaps who mend your washing machine and the man who comes around to put the central heating right? And there's a reason why these domestic repairmen are amassing a fortune. It's because not enough people understand the noises they make. For example, consider the man who comes round to repair, let's say, a conked out boiler. Now what happens? He takes the cover off, gives a glance under it and straightens up. Then he goes, The is £7. The is another 12. Now, this is true. I am speaking to you young people as someone who is old enough to be your elder brother. Slightly elder brother. And it gets worse. Sometimes, after going, he takes out his screwdriver, his diamond and ruby studded screwdriver, and he goes, bum, 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 bum. Every bum is another quid. Now, why do you think these people wear mink overalls? It is essential that you young marrieds learn this language, and I'll tell you why you must learn it. Because, heaven forbid, the day may come where instead of going, or bum, 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 he may go, Now let me, here and now, inform any young couple starting out in life, when they go, forget it. Join a commune, build a tree house, split up and go back and live with your parents. There is no one alive in our present economy who can afford a... Because, you see, between the time when he gives you this estimate and the bill comes, any technician worth his salt is reckoning he can turn a into a... In fact, they even have a proverb about it between themselves, you know, one that they pinch from Swinburne. You'll hear them say, even the weeniest wine somewhere safe to...
Well, ladies and gentlemen, by your vote, Denis Norden wins the contest of the stories, but all the same, the other team, Dilys, Powell and Frank Muir, win the entire contest, and that brings us to an end of this edition of My Word.
In My Word, you heard Dilys Powell, Anne Scott James, Frank Muir and Denis Norden, introduced by Jack Longland, who also compiled the questions. The programme was devised by Tony Schreien and Edward J. Mason and presented by the BBC. The BBC presents My Word. And here to introduce the programme and the panel is Jack Longland.
My Word is a word game played by people whose business is words, and those taking part are Anne Scott James, Denis Norden, Dilys Powell, and Frank Muir. And here's round one to test their vocabulary. For 2 marks, I want to know the meaning of the following words. We begin with Anne Scott James. Anne, what's the meaning of redingote? R-E-D-I-N-G-O-T-E, or we might call it redingote.
Well, it's a kind of coat which, when I was young, used just to meet, edge to edge. But now when everybody's sort of slightly in these days of semi-nude fashions, I would say the coat just doesn't quite meet, or it doesn't quite meet at strategic points. But basically it's an edge-to-edge coat.
I don't know that...
it comes from a riding coat.
That's
it
quite
never
right.
overlaps. No, it's never double-breasted.
Well, I speak with great diffidence to a distinguished ex-fashion editress, but in fact it was originally double-breasted. That was the whole point.
Well, it never is. The meaning is completely lost now. Redingote always means one which just overlaps.
It was a man's riding coat, which was imported into France, was then copied by the women, and it was at that time a long double-breasted outer coat with the skirts cut away in front, but over the top bit, as it were, it was double-breasted. I think for up-to-date knowledge, too, that's all right. Frank Muir, what is a fellow, or something?
Well, it's the one who dances forward.
Spelled F-E-L-L-O-E, or it can be Felloe. Fellow, Felloe. What is it? F-E-L-L-O-E.
an article of dress.
It's a static, though.
Yeah.
Of dress, article of dress.
It's an article of Powell.
No, it goes round and round and round.
Goes round and round.
It's a weathercock.
Goes round and round and round. Goes round.
Felly.
Felloe.
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 F-E-L-L-O-E.
It's a
It's
drill.
a kind of wheel. It's kind of bit of the wheel.
Which bit?
The spoke.
I'm going to give you 1 out of 2 because you've got exactly the wrong one. The felloe
It's the middle.
is the exterior rim, or part of the rim or wheel, the bit that's supported by the spokes in the middle. And in the plural, you say felloes. It's the curved bits which, if they're joined together in wood, gradually make up a round wheel. Very clever. 1 out of 2. Dilys Powell, what is a clepsydra? C-L-E-P-S-Y-D-R-A. If you want to be frightfully classical, you would start it with a K.
It's a thief of water.
Yes, that's right. Exactly what it means. What do you suppose thieves water?
Goldfish.
It's a thief of time.
Yes, it is.
It's a clock.
A kind of
water
clock. A water clock, that's exactly what I wanted. 2 marks it is, well done. It's a time-measuring device, measured rather like an hourglass, not sand dropping into a lower compartment, but water dropping. And it was, as Dilys quite rightly says, 2 Greek words meaning the water stealer. 2 marks. Denis Norden, what does backsheesh mean? B-A-K-S-H-E-E-S-H. Backsheesh.
Presumably a redingote which doesn't quite meet. There's a certain amount of front sheesh. Backsheesh is a very useful word for all radio script writers. If you start a scene by getting all the actors round a mic saying backsheesh, 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 everybody listening knows that the action has shifted to the Orient.
Oriental rhubarb.
Yes. Rhubarb. In the Far East. It's things that they murmur in the Far East. We've often written it without really knowing what it means. But it's a request for money, I think.
That's right. 2 marks it is. It means a gratuity, alms, a tip. And it's a Persian word, or comes from a Persian word, meaning to give. Give, please. Before we begin the second round, I read out a quotation for each team to write down, and I want the 2 women members of the team to study them, because at the end of the programme, I shall ask them where those quotations come from. Anne Scott James and Denis Norden, your quotation is, "Nor iron bars a cage." And Dilys Powell and Frank, yours is, "He flies through the air with the greatest of ease." And then in the last round of the programme, I shall ask Denis and Frank to give me their idea of how these came to be said or written. Next comes a round of slang expressions, or at any rate of expressions in colloquial use at one time or another. And 2 marks again. Anne Scott James, who is or was a hot blanketeer?
I should think it was a pioneer of the permissive society.
Somebody who made hot pants out of blankets.
Haven't we answered it correctly?
No, not yet, no. It's at what stage would you expect to find your blankets hot?
Somebody who invented the warming pan.
That's a good idea.
Or filled the hot water bottles. Or was an electrical engineer who specialised in electric blankets.
It's earlier than that.
There used to be a notice in
We're
a Polish inn, or the Polish inns, which used to say, "Sleep fast, we need the blankets."
Yes, you're getting very much nearer this, but a half mark I think is about fair. It's a woman who pawns her blankets while they're still warm from being slept in, and she redeems them again before night time. It's a bit of proletarian slang lasting into this century. Frank Muir, what does or did "odd come shortly" mean? Odd come shortly. It's in your favourite century.
18th? Odd was always very holy, wasn't it, and good. All odd numbers were holy numbers.
I think we've got to take the phrase together. Odd come shortly.
Well, so, there's a good time coming.
Yes, how soon?
Oh, it's ever so far away. Right, jolly good luck. Hooray. There's a good time coming. Odd come shortly is, there's a good time just around the corner.
1.5. I may be marking a little unfairly. It means...
Which way?
It means someday. Dean Swift says, Miss, when will you be married? And the reply is, one of those odd-come-shortlies, Colonel. So it's someday, somewhere in the future.
What was that, Ian?
You were very nearly right.
Polite conversation?
Yes.
Oh, then it was a cliché.
1.5. Dilys Powell, what and where would you suppose a pew opener's muscle to be? What and where?
His hand.
Yes, and which bit of the hand?
Because he hoped to have something put in it.
Well done. Absolutely right. It's a bit of medical slang. It's the muscle in the palm of the hand, and a chap called Sir James Brodie writes about it, because it helps to contract and hollow the palm of the hand for the reception of a tip. 2 marks. Denis Norden, to give a girl a green gown. What did that imply?
Yeah. It comes from the same root as another slang expression, to get your greens. And it meant to take a girl and make her gown green from grass. Mm-hmm. I think that's
You're dead right, Dennis. Well done. It's a 16th century phrase for romping with a girl in the fields or rolling around the grass so that her dress is stained green. It went a little beyond innocent amusement, I think.
On a wet day, presumably.
Well, it comes in Herrick, and I think he always was talking about sunny days, but never mind. We now get a round of differences, and for 2 marks, I want the team to define the difference in meaning between the following pairs of fairly similar-sounding words. And Scott James, the difference between prevaricate and procrastinate.
Well, prevaricate means to tell an untruth, and to procrastinate means to delay.
Yes. It's not...
Put things off until
that's
tomorrow.
That's dead right. Prevaricate is not quite the direct lie, is it, though?
No, I didn't say it was. I said it was to tell an untruth, tell something which isn't strictly true.
To be evasive.
That's it.
Yes.
That's what I wanted. Yep. 2 marks it is. Prevaricate is to quibble, to equivocate. In law, it means to betray the cause of your client by collusion with his opponent. Procrastinate, to defer action or to delay, to be dilatory. And it comes from a Latin word meaning something which belongs to tomorrow, putting off to tomorrow. 2 marks. Frank Muir, cash along and catch a lot. C-A-C-H-O-L-O-N-G and C-A-C-H-A-L-O-T. It can be cash a low rather than cash a lot. Cash along, cash a lot.
These are quite interesting, actually. These are 2 technical words. I don't know if you know how to catch eels, but you catch them with a perforated metal plate, oddly enough. And if you just bore a big hole in the plate, the only sort of eel you're going to be left with is a long one. You catch a long eel. But if you just bore very, very tiny holes, you catch a lot.
Well, cash a lot is a fish.
It's a
It's
fish.
a
Oh, don't be silly.
It is.
Unless you can help.
It's
Be constructive
it's
about
a
this.
kind of whale.
That's right.
A kind of whale.
It's a kind of whale.
It's a kind of whale.
If Moby Dick hadn't been white, he'd have been a cachalot.
He was Cashalong.
Oh.
Have a shot at Cashalong, which is quite different.
Cachalong. It's a jewel.
Say which it is.
A jewel. No, it's a jewel.
It's a precious jewel.
This is a precious jewel.
Moderately. Cachalot are the species of whales which have teeth in the lower jaw.
Whales.
And the common cachalot is the sperm whale, Moby Dick and so on. It means toothed, it comes from the French. Cachalong is a stone, it's a kind of opal. It comes fairly far east, among the Tartars and the Kalmucks. Cachilon, which means beautiful stone. Dilys Powell, iridescent and iridentist.
Iridescent means rather shining.
And shining in a particular way.
Shining in a kind of rainbow type.
Yes, please. Good.
Shining like a rainbow. And iridentist means you simply refuse to change your mind and be reclaimed from your political or other views.
It came to mean that in the end, Dilys,
Well,
but it starts a little differently, territorially differently.
It means you will not give up your claim to belong to have somebody else belong to your nation. I mean, to
That's
have
right.
other territory.
That's it. Well done. That's good enough. 2 marks.
You are a great poet.
Iridescent, showing colours like those of the rainbow, or changing your colour with position like a chameleon does, and the goddess of the rainbow in Greek was Iris. Iridentist comes from a phrase Italia iridenta, which means unredeemed Italy, and it was the bit that they wanted to get back. The Italian-speaking districts, which were still subject to other countries, including parts of the Tyrol, for instance, and hence other nations have used it too, Greeks and Poles and Austrians, who wanted bits of territory back where they had people speaking their own language. 2 marks. Denis Norden, LIFO and LILO. These are not words, but they're large capital initials with dots between them. LIFO and LILO.
Well, LIFO is Little Indians Fear Otters. And LILO is Large Indians Love Otters. There is a world of difference, Otto-wise. Other than that, I've never heard of I've heard of Lilo in another connection.
Denis, you're not very familiar with the stock exchange.
And they are not familiar with me. I know. another. Oh, are these stock exchange abbreviations?
Yes.
I know another stock exchange abbreviation, which is POETS, POETS, which is the name of a drinking club in the stock exchange. It stands for Push Off Early, Tomorrow's Saturday.
Well,
Except it isn't push.
It isn't push off.
Well, I wish I could give you a half mark for that, because it's so nice. These are stockbrokers' terms for the valuation of stock. LIFO is last in, first out, and LILO is last in, last out. Now we come to the last round and go back to those 2 quotations I gave the teams earlier in the programme. For 2 marks, and Scott James, can you give the origin of your quotation? Nor iron bars a cage.
It's from Lovelace.
The Cavalier poet Richard Lovelace, a poem to Althea from prison. Stone walls do not a prison make, nor iron bars a cage. 2 marks. Now, Dilys Powell, can I have the origin of your quotation? He flies through the air with the greatest of ease.
A daring young man on the flying trapeze.
That's right.
Well, it's just a song. Very popular musical song.
I think that's good enough. There was a book of short stories also written by William Saroyan with the same title, but that's the only bit I could read. Yes, we have 2 marks. Well, now I'm going to ask Denis and Frank to give me their explanations of how these particular quotations came into being, and the marks for this round only will be decided by the length of applause which each receives from the audience here in the theatre. So back to Denis Norden and Nor Iron Bars a Cage.
I'm sorry if I seem to be panting a bit at the start of this programme. It was because I'd just come from the psychiatrist. Oh, not for myself. Not in any way. I'm much better now. No, I was accompanying a friend of mine called George Mallow, and he was taking his wife to this psychiatrist. Poor girl, actually. There's really nothing to laugh about. So the psychiatrist said it's an absolutely classical case of CFR. You don't know what I'm sorry. You don't know what CFR is. Well, it's a bit embarrassing, this. It's what's known as a female ailment. It's compulsive furniture rearrangement. Some psychiatrists refer to it as IJTICTRRAB, which is short for I thought I'd just change the room round a bit, which is one of the most characteristic phrases of acute victims of CFR. And George's wife is a very acute victim. She can't leave anything where it was originally put, which made things very difficult at the start of their marriage. It wasn't the honeymoon so much, it was after that, when they got into their new home, that the aberration really took hold. On the second night there,
I'd like to try it on top, she said. Imagine having to get out of bed in the middle of the night to move the electric blanket from beneath the undersheet to on top of the above sheet. Well, just to make a little change, she said. Just to make a little change. This is what they say, victims of CFR. And from that moment on, the obsession really took hold. The sideboard to behind the sofa, the refrigerator into the front hall, the TV set to underneath the occasional table. Now, it may sound trivial, this, but I can assure you, when I visited them a couple of months later, after they'd been in there, George was already looking terribly gaunt and a bit haggard. "Go in there," he whispered, pointing a trembling finger, on which I could still see the burn ointment, which was from when she'd switched the hot tap and the cold tap around. "Look at that," he said, pointing. My blood ran cold. On the grandfather clock, the figure 12 was now at the bottom. Now, I don't mind telling you, it gave me a funny turn. I came over very peculiar. I said to George, "I'm sorry, I feel a bit... Where's the loo?" Do you know, that poor man... he had to consult a map. Oh, I said, "This is no good. This is no good to you at all. You've got to leave her, George." Well, there is only one thing, isn't there, in a case like that? The psychiatrist, which, as I said before, is where I came from just before this program. And as I say, if I was panting, I really couldn't help it. You see, after she'd been in with him for half an hour, he came out and asked if I'd help him lift the couch from the consulting room into the waiting. You see, it stops at nothing, this CFR. Neither electric blankets, nor water taps, nor grandfather clocks, nor, as the psychiatrist said in what I only think is an unconscious parody of Lovelace, nor even bars a couch.
I do always think that Denis has the most remarkable friends. We now go on to Frank Muir, and if you remember, his quotation was, "He flies through the air with the greatest of ease."
There are a few moments before the BBC lunchtime concert, so just enough time, I think, for me to give you some notes on the programme. Dmitri Shostakovich was born at a very early age. He came of mixed parentage, one woman and one man. He was born in the Russian city of St. Petersburg. He studied music there, and then, as you know, he wrote his symphonies. The Ninth Symphony is probably the most famous. And he wrote it because he'd already written 8 symphonies, and he wanted to write one more. I don't think there's much point in me telling you more about Shostakovich, because we're not playing any of his music. We are playing a piece by Franz Lehár. I only talked about Shostakovich because I don't know much about Franz Lehár. I don't know much about Shostakovich either, but it doesn't show as quickly. Franz Lehár was called Franz by his father, who was very fond of geography, and he named his son after the land in which he was born. He was born in Romania. Mr. Lehár Sr. was very fond of geography, but not very good at it. The soloist this afternoon you're going to hear is Fred Bottom. Fred Bottom is probably not familiar to you because he hasn't been playing the piano very long. He is by trade a demolisher of houses. In fact, we're only having Fred Bottom as soloist because we're nearing the end of the BBC's financial year and they can only afford £3.15 for the soloist. It's quite a difficult work to play, but I think Fred Bottom will be up to it. I was driving in the country and I ran into Sir Arthur Bliss. And whilst we were exchanging insurance information over the bonnets of the cars, I'd asked him whether he'd ever heard of Fred Bottom, because I knew he was going to play, and he said, yes, he's an extraordinary man. He demolished my house. He said, we were dining at the time. Because as Lehar wasn't very good at spelling, and his father wasn't very good at geography, Fred Bottom isn't very good on a sense of direction. But he said that as he demolishes houses during the day, his lug holes bung up with brick dust, so he can't hear himself playing. So he plays faster and faster and faster. So, ladies and gentlemen, the BBC's lunchtime concert, we present the Concerto No. 1. And as for the soloist, I can only give you Sir Arthur Bliss's description of him. He flies through Lehar with the grittiest of ears.
By your vote, it's a tie in the contest of the two stories, but Dilys Powell and Frank Muir win the entire contest, and that brings to an end this edition of My Word.
In My Word, you heard Dilys Powell, Anne Scott James, Frank Muir and Denis Norden, introduced by Jack Longland, who also compiled the questions. The programme was devised by Tony Schreien and Edward J. Mason and presented by the BBC.
You've been listening to My Word from the BBC, heard each week at this time. This is the WFMT Fine Arts Network.
BBC presents My Word. And here to introduce the programme and the panel is Jack Longland.
My Word is a word game played by people whose business is words, and those taking part are Anne Scott James, Denis Norden, Dilys Powell, and Frank Muir. Here's round one, and for 2 marks, I want to know the meaning of the following words. Dilys Powell to start with. Dilys, what's the meaning of skyamachi? S-C-I-A-M-A-C-H-Y, skyamachi or skiamachi?
It could be a K, could it? S-K, or couldn't it?
It could be a K, easily.
Well, I worked that out. It's a battle, and skia is a shade or shadow, so it's fighting the shadows.
Absolutely right. 2 marks it is. It's an imaginary or futile combat, a sham fight for exercise or practice, and 2 words, as Dilys quite rightly says, one meaning shade or shadow, and the other meaning fighting. Denis Norden, what is a mavis? M-A-V-I-S.
If you'll just stand back a moment. I have heard the mavis singing his love song to the morn. That may remind some of you that you're carnage tuning as well. Mavis is a bird.
Yes.
It's a singing bird.
A very singing bird. Yes, well, have a shot. It is almost the most common singing bird.
Thrush.
Yes, fair enough. Good. 2 marks.
If they bomb you, they're called a missile thrush.
I give up. This one's the song thrush, Turdus musicus, in Middle English, and this is still rather a poetical word. Anne Scott James, the meaning of baldachin.
Well, I think it's a corruption of bald queen, or Queen Elizabeth with her wig off.
Horrible thought.
It's something to do with a tent or canopy.
Yes.
More seriously.
Yes, very much so. Where would you find it?
I'd normally expect to find it outside an Italian palace.
Oh, look. 2 marks. Baldachin is a rather odd word because originally it was a woven stuff of a rich brocade with a woof of silk and a warp of gold. And then somehow or other it became an architectural feature, a canopy, which projects or stands on pillars over an altar or a throne or a doorway. And it's simply the Italian word for Baghdad, Baldacco. 2 marks. Frank Muir, what does enuresis mean?
Esis is a disease, isn't it?
Well, this is very much so, yes.
You know, if the Halley Orchestra walks all over your toe, you have halitosis. Has it to do, my partner suggests, with the bodily functions?
Yes. Very much so.
It means spending a sixpence.
Not a very accurate definition, but I'll give you your 2 marks. With babies and others, it normally just means bedwetting. Well, before we begin round 2, I read out a quotation for each team to write down, and I hope the 2 women members of the teams will go on studying them, because at the end of the programme, I shall ask them where the quotations come from. Dilys Powell and Frank Muir, your quotation is, "Where are the snows of yesteryear?" And Anne Scott James and Denis, yours is, "The girl that I marry will have to be as soft and as pink as a nursery." And then in the last round, I shall ask Frank and Denis to give me their idea of how these came to be said or written. In the next round, we come to the author of the week, and I want the author identified, and shall then ask some questions about the author and works. 2 marks for a correct answer. Here is a quotation for identification purposes. "It is a truth universally acknowledged that a single man in possession of a good fortune must be in want of a wife." Dilys Powell, who is the writer, and which book does the quotation come from?
Well, it ought to be Jane Austen.
It is Jane Austen.
It is Jane Austen. And I should think it's Pride and Prejudice.
Yes, well done.
The opening lines.
Absolutely right. Jane Austen, the beginning of Pride and Prejudice. Denis Norden, what was the name of the grand lady in Pride and Prejudice, and who are the two sisters with whose checkered path towards marriage the novel mainly deals?
The lady was Lady Catherine de Bourgh.
Yes.
And it deals with the Bennet family, Elizabeth and Jane.
Well done. 2 marks it is. Yes, in the end, Jane marries Charles Bingley and Elizabeth marries Fitzwilliam Darcy. But poor Lydia, the sister, runs off with an adventurer, but he's made to marry her too and amply provided for. Well done, 2 marks. Anne Scott James, who is the very clever and self-satisfied young lady who gives her name to the title of another of Jane Austen's novels, and whom does she marry in the end?
Well, I think you must mean Emma.
Yes.
Oh, goodness. What's the name of her boyfriend? Can you remember?
No, I got mixed up with Darcy, but that
Yes.
No, that was Pride and Prejudice.
Yeah.
Won't do.
No, her chum Harriet Smith tries to catch him as well, but I don't know if that helps.
No, I remember the whole story and the whole episode, but I am not going to remember the name.
It isn't a very easy name. All right, 1 out of 2. Emma takes in Harriet Smith as a kind of ward and then tries endlessly to get her married off. And Emma eventually does manage to marry a rich bachelor who is Mr. Knightley.
Oh, how idiotic.
And Harriet catches Robert Martin, the farmer, on the second time round. 1 out of 2. Frank Muir, which was perhaps the earliest of Jane Austen's novels to be finished, but was published only posthumously, and which novel or novels did it set out to ridicule?
There were 2 published posthumously.
That's right.
One I can't remember. The other was the Northanger Abbey.
That's right.
Northanger Abbey, I think she wrote really fairly early on, and in fact sold.
Mm-hmm.
But it wasn't published, and in fact the idiot publisher sold it back again.
That's right.
After she was famous. He didn't connect her with the work. Northanger Abbey was a send-up of the Monk Lewis, the Gothic.
That's fair enough. Well done. Thank you, Frank. 2 marks. Northanger Abbey was indeed begun in 1797, sold to a publisher in 1809. He sat on it till 1816, was then revised by Jane possibly, but seems to be the earliest of the works that she began on. And it was only published in 1818, the year after she died, as was Persuasion, which had been started very much later. And Northanger Abbey takes off the Gothic novel, as Frank quite rightly says, the Mistress Udolpho and Monk Lewis and so on. Now round about the origin of various words and expressions, what I want to know is what they mean today and also how they originated. 2 marks and a possible bonus mark for exceptional learning. Dilys Powell, what is a chancellor nowadays, but what was he originally?
Well, he can be the person who makes up the budget, Chancellor of the Exchequer.
Mm. Think of the Latin word it comes from.
I was trying to think of that, without an H in it.
Yes.
Something to do with the council.
Cancellarius.
Cancellarius.
No,
It's an anagram of Hank Cello.
Somebody who cancelled it out.
No, I don't think that's helping you at all. Nowadays, it's an officer of very great importance. Chancellor of the Exchequer, Chancellor of a diocese, the Lord Chancellor. But it was originally a very, very small officer indeed, he called Cancellarius, who was stationed at the chancel in the Roman law courts as usher of the court, and he kept the public out.
Oh.
So he wasn't a very important chap at all, once upon a time. Now, Denis Norden, why were dragoons so called?
I should think it's something to do with a dragon.
It is?
They either had a dragon as their sort of insignia, or else it was sort of symbolic of the way they breathed fire.
You're getting very close indeed, but not
and
necessarily...
pounced upon maidens in forests.
Not necessarily they who actually breathed the fire, if you think of what they might have carried.
They carried some kind of gun, which was expelled a lot of fire and smoke.
1.5. They used to be armed with what were called dragons, which are short muskets which spouted out fire just like a real dragon. And the earliest of them, and Dennis got very close to this, had the head of a dragon wrought on the muzzle itself.
Then just to point out to Jack the thing he said there, he said the gun started fire just like a real dragon.
I've always believed implicitly in dragons. Now, Ian Scott James, what was the quadrivium and why so called? Quadrivium, quadrivium.
Well, I think it's pretty well safe to say it's something that was known in Roman times.
It was?
I should think it's some kind of a throne with 4 legs. Is it a sort of stiff and solid object?
No.
Is it an association of objects?
Yes, that's right.
It's some kind of political or council.
Yes,
of 4.
Council of 4, we think.
No, there are 4 things in it. That's absolutely right. But it is something to do with the way in which they used to teach in universities. I'm going about as far as I can.
Oh, the 4 R's. Reading, writing, arithmetic, and...
Rioting.
Right.
Well,
2 marks.
Half a mark for ingenuity.
Oh, dear.
It was the collective name given in the Middle Ages at the universities to the 4 liberal arts: arithmetic, music, geometry, and astronomy. And it's Latin for 4-way, as opposed to the trivium, which was the 3-way, which was grammar, rhetoric, and logic, which was the way you got to eloquence. Frank Muir, tree, pole, pen.
Yes. Tree, pole. Somebody writing up a parrot up a tree.
No, I want to know where they are and what they mean.
It's Cornish.
Yes.
And it's something about tree, pole, pen is you find a Cornish men because tree, they're all prefixes or suffixes of Cornish names, aren't they? Like Trelawney, Sadler's Wells.
Yep.
Pineapple Pole and Pennsylvania 655. They're all...
Before you get off beam, I'm going to give you your 2 marks. They come in front of many Cornish names, whether personal names or place names: Trevose Head, Trevelyan, Polperro, Penzance, Penberthy, and so on. And they mean the tree, it means a house in Cornish, the pole means a pool, and in the hilly bit of Cornwall, pen means a height or a peak. Well, now we come to the last round, and go back to those quotations I gave the 2 teams earlier in the programme. For 2 marks, Dilys Powell, can you give me the origin of your quotation? Where are the snows of yesteryear?
The translation of a poem by François Villon, Où sont les neiges d'antan.
Well done. François Villon wrote the Great Testament, and he wrote about the beautiful dead ladies, the Ballade des Dames du Temps Jadis, and this was the one which contained the line translated into Where are the snows of yesteryear? 2 marks. Now, Ian Scott James, the origin of your quotation: the girl that I marry will have to be as soft and as pink as a nursery.
Well, it was in one of those good, clean, wholesome American musicals, namely Annie Get Your Gun.
Well done. Remember who wrote the music and lyrics?
Berlin.
Yes. 2 marks. Music and lyrics by Irving Berlin. Put on at the Coliseum in 1947 and starred Dolores Gray and Bill Johnson. Well, now I'm going to ask Frank and Denis to give me their explanations of how these quotations came into being, and for this round only, the marks will go to whichever improbable story receives the longer applause from the audience here in the theatre. So back to Frank Muir and to Where are the Snows of Yesteryear.
If I may just read you with appropriate modesty a letter from my fan mail. Well, my fan mail, you see, for the past quarter. The letter goes: I met you during the war. You were the tall, youthful, fresh-faced, good-looking in an obvious sort of way. I saw you again last week, and look at you. You looked awful. Your hair's gone all grey, bags under your eyes, pale-faced, eyes like 2 lumps of rhubarb in a plate of semolina, teeth like a bag of wine gums. What's happened to you? Signed, a devoted fan. Well, devoted fan, I'll tell you exactly what's happened to me in the 30 years interval since we met. I haven't been getting enough sleep. For the last few years, what with one thing and another, I doubt whether I've averaged more than 2 or 3 hours a day. I've been getting my sleep at night, of course. The normal 14 hours, but of course that's not enough. You see, the whole of the world, or everybody in the world, are divided like late trains into sleepers and non-sleepers. And we sleepers, we just have to have more than non-sleepers. Particularly those of us whom I call nappers. We have to have little naps all day. Now, a good napper can lie down anywhere and sleep. Hamlet, are you familiar with Hamlet? Neither am I. But Hamlet is totally absorbed with the question of not getting enough sleep, even where the play of Hamlet takes place. The castle was named after a Spanish word for the noise made when a person sleeps, el snore. If you look at Hamlet desperately trying to get back to sleep, you see, in the early days in Denmark, they had a kind of sleeping pill, which wasn't a pill. It was an ointment. It was rancid Danish butter mixed with herbs, which they rubbed into their skin. And when Hamlet couldn't get to sleep in one of those tortuous monologues of his, do you remember the one he says? He says, to sleep, perchance to dream. Ah, there's the rub. He's found it. There's a lot about sleep in Hamlet, there really is. And it's, and also, you see, in the general world, this business of dozing off, having a cat nap, having a ziz, it's talked about in song. Any of you see Bless the Bride, the A.P. Herbert Vivian Ellis musical, when the young French bridegroom sings to his bride his idea of a lovely day, which is to have a ziz. He sings, "This is my lovely day. This is the day I will remember." He sang rather higher than I do. A good napper, a good zizzer like myself, you've got to snatch the opportunity where you can. But not in the modern world. It's all gone. You can't have a quick nap in a telephone box. They're doing away with the telephone boxes. You have to telephone in a public building. You have to crouch beneath a sort of plastic hairdryer with shotgun wounds in it. A taxi, a 3-minute trip in a taxi now costs about 45 bob. The sound of the meter ticking over is like machine gun fire. You can't possibly sleep. So I went upstairs, away from the sound, into the bedroom. But then jet planes, you see, live near London Airport. Jumbo jet. Wheels, all 42 of them, 9 inches from the BBC Two aerial. You can't sleep. Eventually, put earplugs in, absolute silence. In comes the Afghan hound, sees me lying back there, levitates herself as they can, you know, they're Oriental dogs, proceeded forward and dropped on me. I was bent double at 90 degrees for a fortnight. Nowadays, in the modern world, you cannot do this thing of having these little refreshing zizzes, naps and snoozes. And that, my fan, is why I'm not looking as healthy and well as I looked 30 years ago. I just am not getting the sleep. Or as Francois Villon said, where are the snoozes of yesteryear?
We go on to Denis Norden with his rather more complicated storyline. The girl that I marry will have to be as soft and as pink as a nursery.
Tell you a thing I've never been able to understand about technology. If they can repair a communication satellite while it's 8,000 miles up in space, why does my TV set always have to go back to the shop? not only go back, but cost me money to be taken back. My TV repairman has a small, clapped-out green van. But you should see the amount that he charges on the bill for time and labour removing and returning set. You'd think it'd been carried round the borders of the parish on the shoulders of 8 cardinals. One thing, the only thing that I've learnt from this shrewd craftsman is the real reason why so many people say television is educational. I have personally, with just one 17-inch set, sent 3 of his sons through boarding school. To say nothing of that daughter of his in a so-called modelling course. Now, if I seem to be hot under the collar about this practitioner of cathode tube larceny, or diddler on the roof, as we called him when he charged 6 man-hours for turning the aerial round, it's because he is only one of the many so-called experts who are drawing the financial lifeblood out of every non-technical minded householder. The electric toaster's bust, I was told the other morning. Do without it. I said, well, do without it. Try ironing the bread. No, she said, no. She said, you've got to have it repaired. I've had a slice of bread in there 10 minutes, and it's as white as anything. It doesn't matter. What does it matter? She said, it's brown bread. So I took the toaster into the electrician's. Dropping it on the counter, I addressed him by that affectionate little nickname which she likes us to call him. Sir, sir, I said, this is my first repair, so please be kind. Kind. When I took a look at the bill for one electric toaster, the spit dried in my mouth. You see, what I'm getting towards is this. There used to be a rather jocular saying that the ideal wife for any man is a deaf and dumb nymphomaniac who lives over a pub. Well, now, that ideal, unfortunately, no longer applies, not in the light of modern servicing charges. The best wife a man can have today is one whom he can use as a sort of live-in repairman. Preferably one with her own television set, the degree of Bachelor of Engineering Science, and a certificate from the Royal Society of Electronics. Or as Irving Berlin rather neatly put it, the girl that I marry will have TV, a BSc Eng, and an RSE.
Well, by your vote, ladies and gentlemen, Denis Norden wins the contest of the 2 stories, and he and his partner, Anne Scott James, also win the entire contest. And that brings to an end this edition of My Word.
In My Word, you heard Dilys Powell, Anne Scott James, Frank Muir and Denis Norden, introduced by Jack Longland, who also compiled the questions. The programme was devised by Tony Schreien and Edward J. Mason and presented by the BBC. BBC presents My Word. And here to introduce the program and the panel is Jack Longland.
My Word is a word game played by people whose business is words, and those taking part are Anne Scott James, Denis Norden, Dilys Powell, and Frank Muir. Round one tries to test their respective vocabularies. For 2 marks, can you give me the meaning of the following words? Beginning with Anne Scott James. Anne, I'd like to know the meaning of repousser. R-E-P-O-U-S-S-E with an accent. Repousser.
Well, pousser means to push. It's the thing they have in French doors, isn't it?
It depends which side of the door.
Pousser and tirer. Repousser. It's something which is pushed. I think it's an artistic word, actually.
It is?
It's a sort of craft, which means hammered metal.
Which side do you start from?
The backside.
That's right. That's what I wanted. 2 marks. It's ornamental metalwork hammered into relief from the reverse side. It means to push from behind, and was originally just an adjective. Frank Muir, the meaning, please, of firkin. F-I-R-K-I-N.
Oh, that's a pleasant word, isn't it? Firkin. It used to be applied to a man's hairy children. But it's now more commonly used, Jack, as a measure of beer. If you say, I don't give 2 pins for that.
Yes.
That's what a firkin is.
I wanted a little more accurately.
Well, a pin is the smallest barrel
yes.
you can get of beer. And a firkin is the equivalent of 2 pins.
I think that's good enough, Frank. That's all right. It's a small cask to hold liquids. It used to hold butter and fish at one time as well.
Not at the same time.
Not at the same time, no. It's a quarter of a barrel, that's what I was trying to get from you. It's half a kilderkin, and a kilderkin held 16 to 18 gallons, so this is 8 to 9 gallons. And you can describe a little tubby person as being a firkin. 2 marks. Dilys Powell, what does a daguerreotype mean?
It's the forerunner of the photograph.
Mm-hmm.
It was a form of drawings, producing a likeness, not by outlining. No.
It was a photograph.
Was a photograph?
It was on a wet metal plate.
Was it?
By Mr. de Daguerre.
Yes.
It took about 20 minutes.
Oh, you stood there and you had a
sitters
shadow.
had to put their head into a sort of pitchfork thing.
Well, Frank, you are interesting.
Known as being daguerreoted. They still exist, actually.
They do, yes.
But it's
I think that's good enough. I mean, after all that flim-flam...
French photographer.
French photographer.
Yes, Daguerre.
1840.
Jolly good shot. 39. It was a portrait taken by this very early photographic process. The impression was taken on a silver plate, sensitized by iodine, which seems to be very odd, and then developed by vapor of mercury, whatever that may mean. And it comes from this chap, Daguerre. 2 marks. Good. Denis Norden, of what does the practice of bottomry consist?
No, I'm not going to be drawn into We once had an idea of writing a nude pop music version of Midsummer Night's Dream and calling it Rock Bottom. But bottomry, I think, is a term used in marine insurance.
Absolutely right. Well done.
And it's in Merchant of Venice.
Well done, Dennis. It's the system of lending money to a ship owner for the purpose of his voyage on the security of the ship itself. So if the chap who lent the money finds that the ship sinks, he gets no money at all. If it doesn't sink, then he gets both the principal and some interest. 2 marks. Well, before we begin round 2, I read out a quotation for each team to write down. And I want the 2 women members to go on studying the quotations, because at the end of the program, I shall ask them where the quotations come from. Anne Scott James and Denis Norden, Your quotation is, "There is a destiny that shapes our ends, rough hew them how we will." And Dilys Powell and Frank Muir, yours is, "Don't cross your bridges till you come to them." And then in the last round of the programme, I shall ask Denis and Frank to give me their idea of how these came to be said or written. Next round's about the author of the week. And what I want is to have the author identified, and I shall then ask some questions about the author and works. 2 marks for each correct answer, and here are quotations to help. "What men call gallantry and God's adultery is much more common where the climate's sultry." Or again, "Sweet is revenge, especially to women."
Ah, that is that witty poet, Lord Byron.
And in which of his works do you think you might find it, Anne?
I should think in Don Juan.
Well done. Absolutely right. 2 marks straight away. This is George Gordon Byron, Lord Byron, and the quotations both come from Canto 1 of Don Juan, which is about a charming and handsome and unprincipled young man who delights in succumbing to the beautiful women whom he meets. Now, Frank Muir. "There was a sound of revelry by night, and Belgium's capital had gathered then her beauty and her chivalry, and bright the lamps shone o'er fair women and brave men." Which is the poem, and what happened next day?
It's... I should think... Yes, it must be Childe Harold.
Yes, good.
Childe Harold's Pilgrimage, in fact. And it's the eve of the Battle of Waterloo.
That's right.
So what happened next day?
2 marks, Frank, before you change history.
Canto, well, I can tell you the canto. Cantos 1 and 2 were published in 1812, and as the Battle of Waterloo hadn't happened then, chances are it wasn't in one of those 2. Canto 4 is about Byron and not Harold. So it's Canto 3, which would be about 1816, 1818.
Yes, jolly good. Absolutely right. You've got the whole thing right. 'Tis Childe Harold, 'tis Byron.
No bonus?
We'll stretch a point and give you 2.5.
Thank you all for breaking his stony heart there with your thought.
Now, Dilys Powell, what did Byron do when on his travels he reached the Hellespont?
He swam across it.
Absolutely right. 2 marks. He stripped first, I think.
Oh.
Swam across it. He afterwards recorded his achievement in that same, in the poem we mentioned first, Don Juan. He could perhaps have passed the Hellespont as once, a feat on which ourselves we prided, Leander, Mr. Eakenhead, and I did. So we know at least 3 chaps who swam without drowning. Well, Leander drowned in the end. And Denis Norden, how and where did Byron die?
Can I go for 2.5
Yes,
on this?
definitely.
Byron died at the age of 36. He was in Italy, working for the Italian liberation movement. When he got interested in the Greek independence movement, he sent money for it, and he sort of formed a sort of group of men to support it. He went over there, and he contracted something like malaria, and he died at a place called Missolonghi, which I will say but refuse to spell. And his heart is buried there, and his body was brought back to England, but they didn't let it rest in the Abbey.
2.5 straight away. Well, now a round of words of movement, or words that imply movement, and again 2 marks for correct answers. Anne Scott James, what is meant by croquet? And I don't mean the noun, I want the verb.
To croquet?
Mm-hmm.
Well, to croquet is a thing which you do when you get on a lawn with 3 other people, all of whom are your best friends, and after about 10 minutes you feel a fiendish enmity, and you hit the opponent's ball, and you then join your ball onto it and slam him into the ditch, putting yourself neatly through the hoop.
Right, absolutely right. Yes, this is a very vindictive part of the game of croquet, and you have to bring your ball up against your opponent's ball, and you put your foot on your ball.
Are you allowed to put your foot
Oh, no.
You used to.
I don't think...
Don't think you are now?
Oh, no.
When I first played as a boy, you put your foot very hard on it.
You're on score, Jack.
You get your name taken and put them in the book.
Anyway, 2 marks. Now, Frank Muir, what is a Roman candle or Roman candling? And I don't mean fireworks or what you find in churches.
It's a very nasty thing indeed. It's a parachuting term.
Yes.
And when I did a first jump at Ringway in Manchester, the fatalities, which is a Roman candle, when the parachute doesn't open, was about 1 in 20,000. And after 3 years, it was about 1 in 250,000. So terrific advances were made in it. But it's when the parachute, through reasons which have never really been quite discovered, just don't open, and they plummet down.
Thank you very much. Absolutely right. It streams out behind you in a long, thin line. I think that's why it's called the Roman candle. 2 marks. Dennis Powell, what is fool's mate? Fool's mate.
Fool's mate?
Mm-hmm.
Something to do with chess?
Yes.
It's when you haven't checkmated.
No.
It's when the check bounces.
I'm going to give you 1 out of 2. It is in chess, and that's the 1 mark. But the first player makes a peculiarly stupid move, which is what I always used to do, and is then checkmated by his opponent's second move. So the game stops at that point.
And you move backwards off the board.
That's diving. Denis Norden, what's meant by selling the dummy?
In rugby and occasionally in soccer, it's a ploy when you pretend to pass the ball, which makes your opponent move sideways, but you actually go straight on with it.
Absolutely right, yeah. Deceive several opponents, probably, or one, by pretending to pass the ball to one of your team colleagues and then going on yourself. There are elaborations like double dummy and false dummy, but let's keep it simple. 2 marks. Well, now we come to the last round and go back to those quotations I gave the teams earlier in the programme. For 2 marks, Anne Scott James, can you give me the origin of your quotation? There is a destiny that shapes our ends, rough hew them how we will.
Well, I think the origin is Hamlet by William Shakespeare.
Do you remember who said so?
Hamlet, I would have thought.
Yes, absolutely right. 2 marks it is. It's Hamlet speaking to Horatio at the beginning of Act 5. Our indiscretions sometimes serve us well when our deep plots do fail, and that should teach us there's a destiny that shapes our ends, rough hew them how we will. Now, Dennis Powell, the origin of yours, please. Don't cross your bridges till you come to them.
Well, I've been thinking about it as you told me to, and I've come to the conclusion it's a proverb.
You're absolutely dead right. You get your 2 marks. Well, now I'm going to ask Dennis and Frank to give me their explanation of how these quotations came into being. And for this round only, the marks will go to whichever improbable story receives the longer applause from the audience here in the theatre. So back to Denis Norden and his one. There is a destiny that shapes our ends, rough hew them how we will.
Look, I said to this psychiatrist. Look, I said, don't tell me I've got a persecution complex, because I have not got a persecution complex. In that case, he said, what do you think is the matter with you? I am actually being persecuted. I said, oh, come now. He said, come. Look, he said, why don't we go inside and talk? I am not leaving this ledge. I said, I am not leaving this ledge till I've blown the gaff about the conspiracy which the whole modern world has entered into to drive any normal person clean out through his own skull. In what way, he said? Tell me in what way. Or at least put me down. All right, I said, I will tell you in what way. For example, why is it they build theatres so that every time you go to see a show, if you decide to put your overcoat in the cloakroom, there's always an empty seat right next to you? And how many times does this happen?
the phone rings, and you pick it up, and when you say, yes, hello, in a deep masculine voice, the person at the other end says, Ethel? Do you want any more examples, I said. Do you know what happened when I drove into a garage recently? They gave me a pair of nylon tights. A pair of nylon tights, 3 glass tumblers, an ice cream, and a set of footballers' photographs. And this was a garage. It wasn't till I'd gone 3 miles I found out they'd neglected to put in petrol. Look, he said, they've got that nice big net down there already. Don't tell me that sort of thing doesn't affect people, I said. You know what I did this afternoon? I said thank you to an automatic lift. I got out at my floor, turned round to the lift and said thank you to a row of buttons. And last night, there was I, a grown man, sitting in front of my television set, crying, moved beyond words, tears coursing down my cheeks, and saying to myself, you fool, it's only a commercial. He comes back to her when she's cleaned her teeth. Do you really think, the psychiatrist said, do you really think you are different from everybody else? I must be, I said. If I can no longer buy a shirt, in this whole big city, there is nowhere I can buy a shirt, it can only mean one thing. I am the only man left in London who isn't tapered. And answer me this. Why has the postman never, not once ever, brought me any of that unsolicited pornographic literature? That was when he pushed me. And as I journeyed downwards, it was then that I realized that that old quotation of Shakespeare really described exactly the malevolence of the modern world and what it does to a man. The only mistake he made was he put the comma in the wrong place. How it should read today is, there is a destiny that shapes our ends rough. Hew them how we will.
Well, I still think that psychiatrist had a rather awkward patient. And we go on to Frank Muir, and if you remember, his quotation was, don't cross your bridges till you come to them.
Very good motto. Because in my experience, behind all the miseries, there can lurk a little bit of pleasure, an exciting good thing. It's like this holiday I've just come back from in Corsica, and this terrible beach we were on. I thought it was terrible, but no. Oh, it was frightful, though. It really was. My wife said it was her fault, really. She said, look, silver sand, a gentle zephyr, there was a heat wave on, can't be wrong. The trouble is with silver sand, it's very fine, and it gets everywhere. I had a little aerosol of suntan oil. I pushed the trigger down, and it squeaked down. Sand got round the edge, fine silver sand, and the button didn't come up again. Do you know how much oil there is in an aerosol? I don't know what to do with the thing. I was spraying oil up in the air. I ran into the sea with it, ruining somebody's copy of Nice Matin and a lady's hat. And I was holding it under, and it was welling up, and the cries of pollution rushed back, and finally I thrust it in my wife's handbag. The gentle zephyr, umbrella, put an umbrella up, parasol, you know, shoved it in the silver sand, got it down 9 inches, bang, solid rock. Solid, wouldn't support a parasol. Then, what do? Heat wave, 100 degrees, lying back there, get a disparity in my swimming trunks. A disparity can be terribly, terribly painful. It's, you know, you 3 days, take it easy, nice gentle tan building up, you see. What happens? Lie out there, lie back, sun, lovely, straight from the swim, swimming trunks shrink. Just a little, and at the top of the thighs, 1/8 of an inch of disparity goes. Grey-white flesh, which gets the full impact of the sun. The rest of the legs are brown, they're protected, but just that full length. At night, lie back in the bed, fluorescent it is. 1/8 of an inch wheels of fluorescent pulsating pain. It's like going to sleep with 2 hot wires around your upper thighs. The following morning, sunbathe, no parasol, lie out, costume shrinks. Another disparity. And the first one then peels. By the 9th day, the disparity has then become painful, but that's another story. So, my wife said, well, don't be a fool. Change. I said, on the beach? She said, yes, well, get out of your costume when you come out of the water and put your pants and your shorts back on again. I put my towel round me and tightened it carefully and found I was staring at a French lady breastfeeding her child. I knew she was French because the child had golden ringlets down to his shoulders and football boots on. So I turned round the other way and I started manoeuvring, one hand holding the towel and the other sort of groping myself suddenly. It was after about 18 minutes, and I had difficulty. I lay down for a while and sobbed in the sand. There seemed, at the time, nothing else to do. I sort of scrabbled at the sand with my fingers, rather like a King Lear. If you can imagine a King Lear with his shorts on back to front. And it was then that my right hand, as it scrabbled in the sand, met something hard. And I picked it up, and it was an old 10-centime piece. I thought, hello. So I really started to work. By midnight, when my wife had sent her in to buy a torch, I really struck riches, and I found a little coarse purse full of foreign coins. Actually, Dilys, who knows foreign currency, tells me that they all come to 1 and 9. But it'll be a help. It'll set us on our way in Lithuania, you see. So take my advice, and if you go to foreign shores and the beach doesn't look nice, don't judge it on just superficial appearances. Something nice might happen. You might find something there, as I did. Or, to quote the old proverb, don't curse your beaches before you comb through them.
By your vote, ladies and gentlemen, Frank Muir wins the story, but nevertheless, the other team, Hind, Scott James and Denis Norden, win the entire contest, and that brings to an end this edition of My Word.
In My Word, you heard Dilys Powell, Anne Scott James, Frank Muir and Denis Norden, introduced by Jack Longland, who also compiled the questions. The programme was devised by Tony Schreien and Edward J. Mason and presented by the BBC.